You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brook-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. And as I mentioned last week, we are delighted to be offering our brand new creation, Waking the Wild Heart. This is a journey into the wild, soulful depths of intimacy, love, and polarity. And it's for both individuals and couples. It's also the first program that Jonathan and I have led together in many years. We are so excited to be doing this. So you are either already in a relationship and are ready to create more juicy, fulfilling, and loving intimacy with your partner, or you're currently single and are ready to create a relationship of this kind. Together, we will free you from the conditioning that's keeping you closed and awaken you to the wildness of your heart, empowering you to express your desire and passion and enable you to open as divine love. We can measure the extent we're living fully by how open our hearts are. Living fully is living with an open heart. Are you ready to live fully? We begin on Thursday, the 3rd of September, and enrollment is opening very soon. There will be limited places, and as ever, they will likely get snapped up fast. So if you're feeling this is for you, go register your interest. And then as soon as we do open for enrollment, we'll come straight to you and give you first dibs on a place. And the place to go do that is primalhappiness.co/WTWH. And now onto this week's show. It's with Acov Darling Khan, the author of the best-selling Jaguar in the Body, Butterfly in the Heart, and Shaman. He is known for his blend of strength, humility, and humour. Travelling the world to work with groups delivering movement medicine, Acov has spoken to audiences across the globe at some of the most pre-eminent platforms driving transformation of world culture and sustainability. Acov's message of shamanism and a shift from society's focus on acquisition to reciprocity is the key to restoring our universal connection and solving our interpersonal and world issues in the process. His 33-year marriage and partnership with movement medicine woman and wife, Susannah, with whom he is co-director of the School of Movement Medicine and co-author of the Hay House published Movement Medicine, forms the loving foundation and union for a life dedicated to transformation of our world. In this show, Acov and I explored such gorgeously rich ground and so timely for our current rupture of coronavirus and the events following the murder of George Floyd. We talked about the invitation these events have created to step into the unknown of the unconscious, the reactivity of our nervous systems, and how fear gets in the way of us being able to be open in the inquiry of the unknown. And lastly, how we can create the embodied safety to journey into that dark but rich territory. This was one of my favourite shows. Acov is one wise and grounded man. This was real medicine for me, and I hope for you too. Hello, Acov. A huge warm welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, such a pleasure. I've already got a big smile on my face just from that kind of chit chat before we started. Turns out we've got a common love of Devon. I was born there, you live there. Both got a kind of relationship to music. Mine kind of sadly not quite as in this generation as I'd like. And also shared love of the path of the descent and the body and the earth. So I am so looking forward to this conversation, even more than I was before we started talking.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Especially hearing about, you were telling me about this sense of the descent that you've been on, from seeing that the bigger picture of the spirit and the oneness and coming back or coming down into the body. And I think I think that journey is a real necessity for our human evolution.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you started this, because it can seem, I think, a bit through our lens of spirituality and people increasing in consciousness now, it can seem as though that descent is almost like harking back, almost like we've outgrown it, like it's out, was relevant to a different time. When, like you, I see that it's actually really what's needed right now. So I'd love to hear you say more about that, because I think that's such a gorgeous place to start.
Yes. Well, it's definitely, we can't go back, can we? We can only go forward. And for me, it's about integration, in shamanism, and in the kind of shamanism that I'm working with, which is all grounded in the body, because shamanism is indigenous to its own culture. It works with the healing of what's broken within its own culture. And a shaman is somebody who has that shamanic spirit, has taken that journey of healing what's been broken or evolving and moving on. And so for me, this integration of the majesty of the intelligence of the body, like the body is not, it doesn't have the same intelligence as the spirit. It's a different intelligence. But put them together, then you've got this, rather than, the body's not good, we should be reaching for this glorious, purified, totally unblemished life, which is just not living. It's not life on earth, is it? Life on earth is cycles, it's digestion, it's growth, it's decay, and so for us, in the modern world, how to integrate the purity of that spirit or that dream with this physicality, and taking care of this physical being as if it were a temple, as if it was the playground or the what we're given through which to experience life. Imagine if actually it was all about bringing heaven to earth through the body. Like that we could evolve an existence here on this earth that was so much more just, so much more sustainable, and so much more awake. And, it's going to require the kind of resilience and ground that only the body can give.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny, because before we started recording, I said to you, one of the real blessings of hosting a podcast is getting to meet people like you. And the other part is hearing someone talk about things that are familiar, and then there's just a way that each individual puts things that allows me to kind of like drop deeper into my own sense of knowing. And I so had that experience you're talking. I just feel so, wow, yes. I love everything you just said there. There was something that just suddenly became really illuminated as you were talking, which is, I don't think it was Jung that said this. I think it was someone in the Jungian lineage was something like, what's most personal is most universal. And as you were talking, I was really feeling the way and we could use, in this instance, we're using the word shaman, but we could be using, I guess, anyone who's in that kind of business of being a change worker of any description. And what you were saying then about that healing, and how as we're journeying into our own shadow, we're really journeying into the shadow of the culture. But the culture shadow and our own shadow are the same. We're not going to be able to have this unique shadow that doesn't apply anywhere else in our culture. And I just saw that so clearly as you said that, which I think links really beautifully to something, again, that you said you would like to talk about in this show, which is that unconscious that is kind of, I guess, like a portal's open to our unconscious through the rupture of the coronavirus and everything that's happening, that is allowing us to access there. And so that just like suddenly like, oh my gosh, that so links to what you'd said then. So yeah, I've just kind of like bombarded you with a whole load of stuff. So feel free to take it where you want. It's just, I really want to share that. It's just like, oh yes, I so see the relevance of that now.
Yes. I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking about what we learn in education in the modern world is that to make mistakes is wrong. But actually you can't. So we're taught to try to reproduce an idea of rightness. And if we can do that well, then we get on. If we can speak the dominant language of the culture, we can get on. If we can tell the same story that's being told again and again, we can get on, we can make it. But deviate from that, then we're veering into the territory of wrongness. And there's so much feeling of wrongness in I see around me. And I'm not just, of course, through the coronavirus and the fear that throws us into when suddenly we're off the edge of the known into the unknown. But of course, all that's coming to light now about systemic racism throughout the world, not like nowhere gets away from that. In Asia, different forms of that, in everywhere in the world, here in Europe, clearly, the history that we've lived and the way that we have tried to hide that and just paint everything it's again back to that purity of light, like the pure light of how we got to this evolved human state, which is so far away from the truth. And don't get me wrong, what we've evolved is magnificent. Absolutely. I couldn't be in a conversation with you right now if it wasn't for the evolution of extraordinary technology through which we're able to stay connected. However, that feeling of trying to adhere to a very particular, a narrow sense of rightness keeps us away from the power of our own unconscious. Because if I tell you, oh, I'm unconscious, like I'm unconscious of my own participation in systemic racism as a white guy, for instance. If I can't be okay with not knowing, if I can't have the resilience to be grounded with not knowing, then I can't learn.
Yes.
And so then I'm always trying to hold on to what I know. And it feels to me like in this time we're being asked to examine what we've been holding on to as the way to do things, like in every area of our existence, every area, the shape of our body. There's a right shape, there's a wrong shape, the color of our skin, the whole thing has been more and more homogenized, more and more limited. And at the same time as life has become more and more complex. So how to find that place in the center of ourselves where we can know what we know, and without going back to school and turning into children who've got the wrong answer, be able to embrace humbly what we don't know. I'm in that process very deeply at the moment with the history of living in the UK. You know, my great grandparents came here as refugees, but the history that I have benefited from, that I was never taught at school, which has been rooted in so much profound suffering for our brothers and sisters of color around the world, and that I've been taught to not notice. And like suddenly, like now, we're being I'm not sure what the word is. It's not exactly invited, but sometimes it's like a kind slap, it feels like to me. Like, hey, wakey, like look and see, and have the courage to see and be embarrassed by it, because the unconscious is so often embarrassing, isn't it? It's like when you kind of go, God, I didn't know, I didn't realize. But so how do we walk along that line of being able to welcome what we don't know, to befriend it, and therefore for our being unconscious not to be a problem, but to be an invitation to learn, to grow. Not that there's something wrong with us for not knowing, but it's more like there's something wrong with us if we don't find the courage to dare to embrace what we don't know. Because if we don't, we're stuck in the narrowest form of culture and idea of what's right, and we don't get to see the full color of our humanity, the diversity of our humanity inside us, between us, all around us. So, you know, I'm really, I feel like getting a very strong, clear, okay, it's time to study a bit more. It's time to learn more. It's time to look at the things that we're being invited to look into by the pandemic, by Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, these seminal moments that have opened the door to a possibility of change. And it's about what meaning we make.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And, you know, we can't evolve by holding on to what we know.
We can't. I love that so much. It's, there's so many things that popped up into my mind as you were talking. I'm just trying to like order them in some coherent fashion. It's, one thing you said that really stood out to me was being embarrassed. And I really, that delighted me actually, because I was thinking, this might be my own relationship to it. I'm not necessarily like, this is the meaning of it. It was just my own relationship. I was thinking, for me, that embarrassment has a lightness to it. You know, it's almost like something quite humorous about it. Like it involves a bit of humility and a bit of kind of like sort of chuckling at yourself a bit, which I was thinking that feels very different to that kind of heavy like shame and like, oh, I can't possibly be wrong, or how could I have done that? And I felt to me like, oh, there's something quite, there is something quite humble, but also again light about the idea of like, it's okay, you know, it is a bit embarrassing, but that's okay. That kind of willingness to be embarrassed. I really loved that. That in itself feels like an invitation that allows us to hold all of these things that have been in shadow, been in our unconscious. It allows us to have this kind of, again, more loving relationship to ourselves and to what we've not seen.
I think that's right. And you beautifully named the difference between shame. Like when I'm ashamed, then I'm making it all about me. When I'm embarrassed, it's because I'm in relationship to what's around me. And I'm like going, oh, and I love the way you describe that as a bit of a lightness. And that it's all to do with how we're received when we become conscious of something that we were unconscious of. And if we get received with blame or more wrongness on top of wrongness on top of wrongness, we just go racing back into our own shell. But if we're received with encouragement, and then there's safety, there's warmth. It's like everything that's born, even if it's in consciousness, needs a good mama.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like to be welcomed into that embrace of, it's okay. Yes, Yakov, you're a bit of an idiot sometimes. You really are, and that's okay. It's all right. You're loved. You're still, gravity is still holding you. And then if we're received in that, and then there's a bit more of an archetypal papa waiting to kind of go, okay, now what? Now you've learned this. What are you going to do about this? What are you going to do differently? How are you going to change your behavior? How are you going to act differently? How are you going to be more of a friend? And, you get that opportunity every time something new is born into consciousness.
Oh, gosh. So much of this conversation is just so rich and juicy. I feel like we're going to talk about, 25% of all the possible things we could talk about. I think you might have to come back on and do another show, quite frankly, because I'm already looking at the time thinking we can't fit it all in.
No problem.
I love what you were just saying. It reminds me of often when I'm working with one-to-one clients, I'll give them an invitation to be in a kind of practice of noticing something like between then and our next session. And it could be anything. It could be like, notice how you're doing this or saying this or holding back from doing this, whatever it could be. And it's not to do anything with it, just to notice. And then more recently, I've been adding in kind of really like big, bold brackets, bring loving awareness to, because it's so easy without that kind of internal sense of like mama to do this in a loving way. We can bring the father too quickly. The notice can be a hard notice, like, oh my goodness, look what I've been doing. How could I have done that? That's horrendous. And I think what needs to come first, like you said, is bring that archetypal mother, that loving, like all-encompassing, unconditional, divine, whatever word you want to give to it, love of like, this is so, and I accept it, I allow it. Before we do anything else with it, that has to come first. I love the way you language that.
Yes. Well, it's when something is coming out of the known into the unknown, or something is coming from unconsciousness into consciousness. It's just not, it's like, my wife works with Exmoor ponies who are considered, they're wild, they're undomesticated. So in the horse world, apparently, I know nothing about horses, let's be clear. But I'm told by my wife that in the horse world, they're often described as really stubborn. But they're not stubborn. They're just very, very connected to their wildness. So they read you immediately. And if there's anything incongruent in what you present to them, like if you're feeling tense and you try and put on a sweet voice, they're gone. Or, you're feeling sad and you try and be nice and jolly, gone. They're not interested. That dissonance means danger. And it's the same for the wild animal inside us. Dissonance, like when we feel that what's being said and what's being meant are not the same, there's a sense of danger. And if that's on top of historical, unhealed, sometimes intergenerational trauma, I'm even going to say always intergenerational, because it's There's nothing that just began. The trauma that of whoever we are, wherever we're from, goes back a long way. But we do have, you were talking about acceptance, like to allow this is true. It's like this, if we don't allow or accept where we actually are, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, the whole thing, then we can't really move on, because we're always fighting against what's real. And so for me, like, spirituality is about the permission to be real in a grounded, embodied sense that makes space for not just that acceptance, but then to be creative with it. And, in shamanism, the way that we access that kind of mothering or like divine embrace of acceptance is through the physical body's connection to the physical earth beneath us. It's gravity. It's the fact that we are material, or at least the body is material. And if I allow my consciousness, my concentration to be within my own skin and to feel how gravity, the mama, the great mama, holds me now, then there's already just a little bit more ground for my being. So that, and without that ground, without roots, the tree won't live. Without good earth, the flower won't flower. So that landing in what's actually true now, in an embrace of some kind of safety, that's for me, it's like a prerequisite for healing and transformation.
Absolutely. You've made me think of something I think would be really good to explore, because what I've been really noticing during this entire period is the invitation, as you're describing, to tap into that both kind of what seems like individual unconscious, but actually is universal unconscious, or at least our cultures, and how those of us who have been fortunate enough to have kind of have that embodied safety, so that we can journey into those inquiries in a way that it feels desirable, feels possible, whether that be a journey into uncovering our unconscious racism, or ways that I don't know. I mean, the whole coronavirus and all the different responses to it is like, again, just such fertile ground where it's so easy to think like your response is the right response. And, people should be wearing masks, or shouldn't be wearing masks, or should be socialized, shouldn't be socialized, should be observing, so shouldn't, all those things that are, if we have that embodied safety, a call into that's interesting, I'm being triggered here. Why is that? What's that a call to? And how without that embodied safety, that isn't an invitation that can be really experienced as the invitation it can be. And so an example of this, I'm just going to try and alter it slightly so it's not too revealing who the person is, because I'm about to show someone else's stories. I'm just going to change it slightly so it's hopefully illustrative enough, but not too revealing. So I had an example recently where a friend had received a message from another friend criticizing her for a choice she'd made in terms of kind of socializing around the coronavirus. And then my friend was quite upset about that and was saying, she's saying I'm wrong, and, but she did X, Y, and Z previously. And I was thinking, so interesting how it's clear to me that there is no universal right. This, all of it is just an invitation to go inward, see what's for us, see what's triggering us about other people's other people's behavior. But I really noticed as she was sharing that, I was thinking, without that embodied safety, it's very difficult for her to see this without that kind of like, oh, I've done wrong. Or maybe it's not me that's done wrong. Maybe it's her that's done wrong. Like it just became this, the knee-jerk reaction was a response of kind of wrong, like just like you're saying at the beginning, it was like, I've done wrong. Or maybe it's not me that's done wrong. Maybe she's done wrong, rather than what's here for me.
Yeah.
So given probably, maybe not most listeners to this show, because most listeners to this show probably are somewhere on this journey. But if we're looking at our, overall culture, that embodied safety is quite lacking. And so I'd just love to hear what you have to say on that. Not necessarily kind of resolve it now, please, Jaguar.
I wish. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I need Harry Potter's magic wand to do that.
I just love to have your thoughts on it more than a kind of resolution.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because it's like you're talking about trauma response and how and the nervous system and how to be able to recognize when we've been triggered. And then what's interesting is like physiologically, if we are triggered into self-defense, like fight, flight, freeze, flock, if we're triggered into that response, even the muscles on our ears tighten.
Wow.
So we can't hear as well. We can't even hear what's being said to us. We're just survival, threat, survival. And I've been shocked to hear time and time again in the last few weeks from friends, people of color, from different walks of life, people strong in the world, people successful in their careers, is that sense of danger is constant. It's not like every now and again I get triggered. There's like a constant sense of being on alert. And I believe that the same is true in a different way for people of European descent. I've been reading Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands, an amazing book. He's a Black trauma therapist who lives in Minneapolis, of all places. And he's done a lot of work about recognizing what he says the white body, the black body, and the police body need to learn about trauma. That how we are so easily in that response. So, and we're only just learning. It's quite recent, the knowledge we're gaining in terms of Western medicine, how the vagus nerve and that kind of core central nervous system is so sensitive to danger and is not really very interested in current moment reality. They're just interested in survival. But there are lots of practices, hundreds of practices that are designed to help us to slow down, come back to the present, to the resource of the moment, to practice ground. I've got roots. Am I in danger right now? Okay, yes, run for your life. No, take a deep breath. Calm, listen a little deeper. And what can I learn? So in all of the work that we're doing, we are supporting people to come back to, we call it the unbroken in the body. The unbroken it's the same force, intelligent force of life that changes an acorn into an oak tree. that knows what it is, that is earth and fire and water and wind, that is roots and trunk and branches, that knows about the seasons and the cycles, and that part of us that is life, that is the intelligence of life, that is movement. Because, the only difference between a dead body and a living body is movement. So movement is life. And that dancer, that part of us that is moving with life, is already connected to a greater intelligence. So the earth of my body knows itself as the body of this earth. And then that's an immediate resource, like, threat. Stop, orientate, ground, breathe. Am I in danger? Yes, run. No, deep breath, calm. Listen. And it's all about, again, being able to acknowledge what's true rather than, we're all going to be what one of my teachers used to call nice, normal neurotics.
Yeah.
And
oh, wow. Yeah. I just love everything you said there. What it made me think of was how subtle. You talked about, there's hundreds of ways to ground ourselves back into our bodies. And I won't profess to know all the hundreds that you mean, but I suspect we've got some in common. And I was thinking, what I notice over and over in both my own personal practices and that I invite clients into is how subtle some of them are. And I think, again, in this culture where we are trained to look for such a like immediate gratification and very direct, I want to do this, therefore I need this to happen, then that to happen. And I was thinking, some of the path into the body, into being able to create that kind of ground and to connect to what you call the unbroken, they can seem quite indirect and subtle. I'm just thinking at this moment of, I'm sure you're familiar with the book Waking the Tiger. And some of the practices that he talks about resensitizing to the felt sense. And it can seem so unrelated to what you're really trying to create. It's kind of like, how can welcoming back my felt sense and like welcoming back parts of my body, how can that possibly relate to me being able to be more kind of present and open in the moment? And there is initial faith needed to start to walk those paths. Like, we're not going to get that like immediate gratification that we're trained to expect in this culture. And yet they are so powerful once we start to journey that way. That's what came out. I'd love to hear what you've got to say on that, but that's really stood out as you were talking just then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm thinking of a child that wants to learn to ride a bicycle. The thing that matters most about that is how much we want to. I want to be able to ride that bike like my friend can, or my elder brother, or whatever, or I want to be able to do that, or I want to be able to run as fast as them. There's a desire. So we have to make it matter. We have to make becoming conscious of who we actually are matter. Becoming conscious of who we are is the only road I know of that I've met so far that leads to any form of actual contentment. And it's all rooted, like the most powerful shamanic practice I've ever learned is interreception. It's about paying attention inside the body to what's happening. And the subtlety of that, to read the language of the body, to be able to talk in the language of the body, just to be able to describe a little bit of tension in the solar plexus, tightness in the left knee, bubbling fizzy warmth in my right hand. That, to be able to speak that language. And the thing that made me so intent on giving so much time to that. You might call it staring into my own belly button. Which is how it's often, it's often pilloried for that. Any kind of contemplative practice. Oh, I haven't got the time to stare at my own belly button. However, the research that's been done about interoception, as I'm sure you know, if I am in while I'm with you or anyone, with a stranger, with somebody very different than I am, if I am present in the sensation of my body, I am immediately much more empathic. The less present I am in my physical interoception, the perception of what's happening in my body now, the less present I am there, the less chance I've got of having any sense of you, being able to hear you, know you, sense you, relate to you, learn from you, have any form of union. It's impossible without that presence. So the payoff of doing that kind of work is immense. It's immense. I'm not talking obviously about material payoff. I'm talking about the experience of life. It's everything tastes better, sounds better. We see more clearly, we hear, and we smell, we touch. Like the power of the sensate animal body, when we allow our attention, our spirit to be present. And again, that's contemporary engaged shamanic practice. Bring your spirit, your dreamer, your imaginal self, bring them through the body into this world. Bring what you dream, bring who you are, bring your love for life into this world. Stop leaving it in the therapy room or in your meditation practice. Bring it with you into the way that you relate. Let's bring it with us into the way we learn together. So it's the ground of everything. I think for modern people growing up in the industrial world, we've got to be able to shift the focus of our attention from thinking about what we're thinking about, what we're supposed to think, to being here, present, aware of the heart, so the mind can be what it's designed to do, which is to be a bowl to receive information. That's the tree of life right there. That's the three worlds of shamanic practice right there. My capacity to open, to receive inspiration, to be in the heart, to be present in the body, to bring a dream to this world, to this earth.
Oh my goodness. I just feel so nourished just listening to you. And it made me think it's the wonderful thing about these kind of practices is the results do speak for themselves. It's like you can talk from your own experience of this. But what I also see is true is when I sit next to someone, when I say sits next to, it could be virtually as we are or in person with someone, the people who have practiced in this way, like it's so tangible. I can, even through this kind of virtual medium, from, the first few minutes of us talking, I was like, wow, this is a deeply present man. This is someone who I already feel delighted to be in connection with. I already know we're going to have a gorgeous conversation. And I would imagine that is largely testament to all of that work you've done. And, it's rare in this culture, but it really stands out when people have traveled that path, because the results are just so gorgeous and magnetic and such a celebration of life.
I think you're talking about we're again, it's that animal sense that knows when we're safe.
Yes.
We know when we can let go. We know when we're, okay, if I let go here, I'm going to be caught. And, if you're somebody that's holding space for other people, the more you know your body as earth, the more you know the life energy that's shining through you as sunlight, which it literally is. We are literally solar powered beings. The more we know ourselves as watery, malleable, deep, slow, crashing, like shape-shifting, unpredictable, the more we know ourselves as like that wide open space and of the sky and the freedom of the wind, that we're already so much more resourced to be able to be with people, to support them in that discomfort of change, of transformation, of confronting something that we have a story as not palatable by ourselves or somebody else. That to be able to welcome, to accept, to learn, and therefore to transform. We need help. We need, and the great thing is we're made of help. We're made of it. This body is, it's been evolving for nearly 14 billion years. It's learned a few things along the way.
Oh my goodness. Do you know what I just realised is, that Harry Potter's wand that you said you needed? I think you literally have just delivered, like that was the wand right there. Ultimately, the body is the wand. And I think you answered that beautifully.
My wife often says the body is her wand.
Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
This has been just delicious. Yeah. And we're just coming up on time. There's a couple of things I would like to ask you before we end. Firstly, is there just anything else? I don't always ask people this question, just to be clear. It just feels as though every time I've asked you a question, what you come back with is just like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I asked that. So it's just that, is there anything else that you think would be helpful for my listeners to hear that you haven't already shared? And also, where can people find out about you? Because I suspect if my listeners are anything like me, and my sense is they're going to really want to find out more about you and your work. So please answer both those questions.
Thank you. Well, yes, absolutely. I think I want to really support people to embrace the discomfort of being in times of change, like to embrace it and to welcome it and to work with recognizing that a little discomfort. It's like when I first danced, I went to a dance workshop. I hated dancing. I felt so self-conscious whenever I danced. But I didn't actually go to a dance workshop. I went to meet somebody it was all under the umbrella of shamanism. I missed all the stuff about dance. But when I got into the room and I saw all these people like leotards stretching, and I was like, oh my God, what have I come to? And then there was music on and everyone was dancing. And I was like, God, how can I get out of here? I've got 3 days to survive. And I discovered very quickly that it wasn't dancing that I hated. It was self-consciousness. It was a feeling of discomfort. But going through that discomfort led to such riches in my life in terms of being able to bring what matters to me into this world. And I really want to encourage us to learn, embrace what we don't know, keep on. It's such a time of revelation and learning for us right now, and not to be afraid of what we don't know, and to really turn towards what's being said, to turn towards discomfort, but to balance that with beauty. Like I often say, the only way of being able to be with the suffering in our world is to give space to acknowledging the beauty where it is. Simple things. And that gives balance. So, thank you very much for asking. And if people do want to find where I am, you can come to the easiest portal is darlingkhan.com. You'll find gateways to all of our work, whether it's our books, our CDs, or online stuff. It's all there.
Gorgeous. Oh, I'm glad I asked you that question. Thank you so much. This has been, just such a pleasure for me personally. And I very much suspect my listeners will feel the same. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and wishing all your listeners all the very best. Thank you.
Wow. I loved this episode. So wise and inspiring. Here are my takeaways. When we're able to allow ourselves not to know, we become open to discover what we don't know. Culturally, that's not encouraged. We are trained to know, to do the right thing. But from there, very little in the way of extra consciousness and creation is possible. Most of us will have trauma that is triggered when we feel we're wrong or don't know. Bringing loving awareness, the archetypal mama, helps us to ease into allowing what's in shadow to be seen. The more we travel the path into our bodies, the more we can create the safety to be in the space of the unknown, and the more present, sensitive, and grounded we can be. If you would like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 286. And if you want to be one of the first to know when we open Waking the Wild Heart for enrollment, then go register your interest now at primalhappiness.co/WTWH. I can already feel this is going to be something so special. And if you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, and I really suggest you don't, we have been really blessed with some amazing guests already been on the show and coming up over the future months. So really don't miss out. Head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or your Android or iOS app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way, you're going to get each episode as soon as it comes out, delivered straight to your device as if by magic. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you again next Tuesday.